Today we're meeting with Wanda Nanibush, an Anishinaabekwe image and word warrior. Wanda is an artist, a curator, a filmmaker, and a writer, and she's guest curator at the Art Gallery of Ontario, where we caught up with her.
So tricksters in our tradition, Nanabozho it would have been originally called, is somebody who breaks all boundaries, who kind of disrupts binaries, is okay with making a fool of himself. So I kind of take that seriously as a way of thinking about working and being in the world. This is Carl Beam. His work speaks both to contemporary indigenous colonial situation, but it also speaks broadly to some of the philosophical and contemporary art stuff going on. And I think that's where I start as a curator. I speak to larger issues through indigenous work as well. The two things that I think that really trouble the question of Canada and also trouble Canadians, one is the fact that we're here now, our contemporaneity. And then the second part is land rights. It's the most misunderstood aspect of Canadian politics. Personally, when I make work, I am always thinking about doing it for my people.
Wanda also takes on roles where she's able to open up the conversation around First Nations culture, as she did with me in the Members Library at the Art Gallery of Ontario.
I'm not here to teach people about my culture. If they happen to gain some knowledge, then that's a nice bonus. But I think I always put the politics up front because it's harder to deal with.
You know, it seems like you don't want to overtly educate, but on the other hand, you have to create a scenario where people can learn.
People don't know what a treaty is. People don't know what the Indian Act is. People don't know lots of things about the history of this country and how it came to be.
Do you see any parallels between the feminist movement of the 70s and the sort of indigenous movement happening today?
I try to come at it from thinking of within the concept of woman, within Anishinaabe culture. And I just did that show with Rebecca Belmore, her solo show Kwe, partly because we were in the context of this large women's history conference. Some people say we are the original feminists because our societies are women-centered societies. How can I relate as a contemporary, and I consider myself a queer woman, how does that relate to culture that values women for, one, caretaking, two, giving birth, all these kinds of things that have been challenged, especially by fourth wave feminism.
What you might not know about Wanda is that her organizing and leadership began very early while she was in foster care, fighting to reform that system.
As a Native person, we're wards of the state as well, under the Indian Act. And then as a foster kid, I'm a ward of the state. And I was taken away when I was 5. My mom fought to keep me from being adopted out. And if I was adopted, I have no access to my family or culture or anyone anymore. Our political leaders, they were fighting for control over education and control over our children. And the children who were in care, some of us were fighting as well. And it dovetailed with the first kind of conversation around residential schools in the 80s. There's more kids in foster care now than there were in residential schools.
Currently, Wanda has teamed up with Elwood Jimmy and her brother Brian Norton to form the Ombaasin collective. I asked her about one of her more recent projects called Braid of Resistance.
I had this dream about a braid that kind of wrapped around the entire earth. So I was telling Elwood, I was like, I would love to see that in real life. We decided to do these braid making workshops with people. And so everybody made their own braid. And the whole process is you're putting, it's a story that you're putting into the braid. It was really interesting to create intimacy and vulnerability and emotion in a space like Harbourfront, we were outside. Yeah. And so all this energy was poured into the braid, and when that happens, it became a different kind of object, not just an art object.
Wanda's work fuses her strong cultural identity with a smart, no-nonsense approach to creating a dialogue about the land and what it means to be in Canada.